I had spent 12 years on the force, 6 of them in SWAT. So believe me when I say I'm used to pressure. I've kicked in doors in the middle of the night, faced down armed suspects, and negotiated with violent offenders. But none of that prepared me for the psychological warfare I would face in a leafy, sun-soaked suburban neighborhood ruled by one tyrannical woman, HOA Karen. My name's Mike Reynolds. I'm 37, no kids, divorced, and after years of eating protein bars in squad cars and rotating shifts, I finally had the time and savings to build my dream home. Nothing flashy. A modern ranch-style build with dark siding, wrap-around porch, and a detached garage for my motorcycle restoration hobby. The lot was tucked near the edge of an upper-middle-class development in Arizona, part of a growing suburb trying too hard to look like gated luxury without the gate. When I bought the land, I was told the neighborhood had a homeowners association. At first, I didn't think twice. I've lived in HOA communities before and figured the usual rules applied. No hot pink lawn ornaments, keep the grass short, that kind of thing. I signed a contract, paid the fees, and started construction. Karen Brooks introduced herself on the second week of the build. Thin, tanned, probably pushing 60, but still dressed like she was the star of a golf commercial. Blonde bob haircut, huge sunglasses, clipboard in hand. She didn't knock. She just strolled onto the construction site like she owned the place and called out, "Hi there, you must be new." I was standing with the site manager reviewing the framing plans when she approached. Her smile was forced, teeth too perfect to be sincere. "Karen Brooks," she said, extending a manicured hand. "President of the HOA. We like to make sure new neighbors are up to code." It wasn't really a greeting. It was a warning. That was the first time I noticed the neighborhood had a strange vibe. Too quiet, too sterile. The lawns were all a uniform shade of green, the same brand of mulch in every flower bed. Even the mailboxes were identical. It was like living in a movie set. My house, even unfinished, already stood out. It wasn't painted beige. That alone seemed to irritate Karen. Over the next several weeks, her visits increased, always unannounced, always finding something to comment on. Once it was the non-regulation fencing material temporarily erected around the site. Another time, she asked if I intended to keep that obnoxious truck in the driveway, a lifted F-150 used to haul tools and gear. She'd tut-tut, scribble something in her notebook, and wander off muttering about community standards. I tried to be polite. I really did. I explained I was a police officer. I said I followed regulations to the letter. I even showed her permits and blueprints. Didn't matter. Karen had decided I was a problem. And if there's one thing I've learned on the job, it's that once a certain kind of person decides you're a problem, facts don't change much. The first official HOA warning came in the mail a week after I moved in. The home was complete. Black stone accents, steel awnings, and a red front door I'd chosen in honor of my late mother's favorite color. The letter said my property was in violation of HOA aesthetics, specifically the door color and garage visibility. I appealed. The bylaws didn't mention anything about red doors. The garage was detached and behind a privacy fence. Still, the violation stood. A second warning followed, this time for construction debris. I'd cleaned the entire lot myself. Then came the unauthorized surveillance equipment complaint. I'd installed a modest home security system with motion sensors and doorbell cams. Karen claimed they were invasive and made neighbors uncomfortable. Again, no rule against them. Still, I was slapped with the threat of daily fines until they were removed. At this point, I stopped pretending we were going to be civil. I began documenting everything. I started wearing my body cam when dealing with Karen. I printed HOA bylaws and highlighted every clause she misquoted. I recorded her coming onto my property without permission. I filed counter-complaints. That's when the petty harassment began. Trash cans mysteriously ended up knocked over. My mail occasionally went missing. Someone scratched the side of my truck. Amazon packages would be marked delivered and never arrive. A neighbor down the street, one of the few who seemed genuinely friendly, confided that Karen had once tried to fine them for growing non-regulation tomatoes in their backyard. "She wants total control," he whispered, "and she especially hates people who don't kneel to her authority." One night, about 2 months after moving in, I caught Karen on camera standing at the edge of my driveway, snapping photos of my house. It was nearly 10 p.m. She saw the camera light, turned red, and bolted like a teenager egging a house. I submitted the footage to the HOA board. They told me it didn't show definitive misconduct. I started noticing her car parked across the street some mornings. Just sitting there, watching. The line between HOA management and personal obsession had clearly blurred. But I wasn't afraid. I've dealt with stalkers. I've dealt with worse. What I felt wasn't fear, it was disbelief. I couldn't wrap my head around how one bitter, small-minded woman could bend an entire neighborhood to her will. Why didn't anyone else fight back? The answer, I learned, was simple. They were scared. Karen held power like a scalpel. She knew every bylaw, every loophole, and had manipulated the HOA board into a rubber stamp regime. She targeted homes with the smallest violations and levied daily fines until people gave up. One neighbor had paid nearly $3,000 in weed control fines over 6 months. Another had his deck repainted because she claimed the wood finish was too orange. People whispered about her at barbecues but smiled to her face. They'd been broken down into submission. That's what bullies do. And Karen was the queen of bullies. Everything came to a head at the next HOA meeting. I attended for the first time in uniform, straight from a shift, still wearing my badge and sidearm. Karen's expression soured the moment I walked in. I stood silently at the back, arms crossed, and listened as she rattled through agenda items like a schoolmarm scolding toddlers. Then, the bombshell. She presented a motion to issue a cease and desist order on my property. Claimed I was operating a commercial business from my garage. The motorcycle repair, she said, voice dripping with disdain, is disruptive and inappropriate for a residential neighborhood. I don't run a business. I restore old bikes as a hobby. Half of them never leave the garage. I asked for proof. She provided a blurry photo of me unloading a Harley from a trailer. That was it. I demanded a vote. The board passed the motion, 3-2, with Karen casting the tie-breaking vote. The cease and desist ordered me to halt commercial operations, remove unauthorized equipment, and submit to an external property inspection within 14 days. Failure to comply would result in administrative escalation. That phrase stuck with me. I didn't know what she meant. Not yet, but I was done playing defense. I filed a formal complaint with the city. I alerted my precinct. I reviewed my legal options. And, most importantly, I upgraded my home security, added perimeter motion detection, multiple 4K cameras, off-site backups. I even mounted one inside the attic, pointing toward the street. Something was coming. I could feel it, and I wasn't wrong. It happened on a Tuesday. One of those brutally hot Arizona mornings when the sun's already scorching by 8 a.m. and the pavement smells like it's melting. I just started a 12-hour shift covering for another officer, domestics, and a few traffic stops, nothing special. When I left my home that morning, everything was perfectly normal. When I came back, it was gone. Let me clarify, not vandalized, not robbed, not set on fire, erased, flattened, reduced to splinters and dust. I arrived home just after 9 p.m., exhausted and sore from wearing body armor all day. Pulled into my street, glanced toward my house, and slammed on the brakes. For a full 10 seconds, I thought I was lost. Wrong address, wrong neighborhood. Except I wasn't. There in the place my home used to stand was a leveled lot. No porch, no walls, no garage, no fence, no red front door. Just a rough pile of broken drywall, snapped 2x4S, shattered glass, and tire tracks, deep tire tracks from something massive. I don't remember getting out of the truck. I just remember standing there, mouth open, heart racing. Adrenaline shot through me like I'd just kicked in a door on a hostage rescue. Fight or flight, kicked and hard. Was there a gas leak? A sinkhole? Arson? Then I noticed the paper nailed to a broken fence post, fluttering in the breeze like a horror movie prop. Notice of demolition. Authorized by HOA Enforcement Division. I couldn't believe it. A notice, typed, stamped, with Karen's name and signature at the bottom. It was printed on standard paper, not even city stationery. No city seal. No court order. Just a fraudulent document dressed up to look official. I dropped to one knee, stared at the debris, and did something I hadn't done since my first fatal car crash scene. I froze. My brain just stalled. Then training took over. I snapped photos with my phone, took video, walked the perimeter, called dispatch, and requested a supervisor and crime scene unit. Then I called my buddy Paul, who works investigations. I was on autopilot, narrating like I was wearing a body cam. But inside, I was a hurricane. When my sergeant showed up, he thought it was a prank. "Reynolds," he muttered, walking around the wreckage. "What the hell am I looking at?" "My house," I said, dead serious. "Or what's left of it." He squatted, picked up a scorched piece of insulation, and just blinked. "You say the HOA ordered this?" I handed him the fake notice of demolition. He read it twice, then whistled. "This is forged." Badly. We started canvassing neighbors. Most were either out or wouldn't answer. But the couple 2 houses down, the ones with the twin labs and yard full of garden gnomes, said they saw a bulldozer arrive around 11 a.m. "Big yellow one," the husband said. "Flatbed, dropped it off." There were a few workers with vests, looked legit. One of them said the house was unpermitted and had to be removed immediately. And then came the bombshell. "She was here," the wife said. "Karen." She was standing right over there. She pointed to the edge of the lot, yelling at the crew, pointing at the house, saying that's the one. My blood went cold. That bulldozer didn't show up randomly. Karen orchestrated this. Somehow, she convinced a crew to demolish a fully built, city-permitted house on private property. In broad daylight. I checked my security system. My network backs up footage to the cloud in real time. The attic camera caught everything. The bulldozer arriving. Karen walking the site. Her gesturing wildly at the house. Her on the phone. And worst of all, her smirking as the machine roared to life. The operator, a subcontractor from a small demo company, didn't question a thing. He followed orders, thinking the paperwork was legit. No city inspector. No cops. No due process. Karen had falsified a demo order, forged a fake HOA enforcement authority, and bulldozed my home. While I was at work, I didn't sleep that night. I filed the first of several reports, contacted the city's building department, flagged the footage, and backed everything up to multiple drives. I contacted my insurance and called a lawyer first thing in the morning. The city's demo permit office confirmed what I suspected. No demolition permit was filed. What Karen had done was criminal trespassing, destruction of property, abuse of authority, and a dozen other violations. But that wasn't all. The contractor, Eagle Eye Excavation, was tricked too. I paid them a visit the next day. The owner, Luis, was red-eyed and shaken. "I swear to God," he told me. We were handed papers. They looked real, had a stamp and everything. "We've done HOA jobs before." She said the city had flagged it for illegal construction. She even wore a damn lanyard like she was official. I showed him the footage. His face went white. "That's her. Oh my God. She was on site. I thought she was an inspector or something. Man, she even told us you were a drug dealer. Said you built the place to launder cash." I had to laugh bitterly. Karen's vendetta had turned into a full-blown fantasy. Luis agreed to cooperate. He gave me everything. Her fake order, emails, even a voice message she'd left, saying, "We need this taken care of quickly. That building shouldn't be there. The HOA has legal oversight." It was gold. My lawyer, Josh, was thrilled. "She's toast," he said, tapping the folder. "We've got fraud, impersonation, destruction of property, possible wire fraud. She's going to jail." But before we filed the civil suit, I wanted one more thing, a sting. I'm a cop. We don't just react, we build cases. And I wasn't about to let Karen slink out of this by claiming ignorance or miscommunication. So we set a trap. I had Luis send her a follow-up email. Said the city needed to confirm the demo and required HOA authorization on file. Karen replied from a private Gmail and attached another forged document, this one with a City of Mesa seal. Bingo. With that, we had her on record using falsified city documents. I called in a favor from a detective in economic crimes. Within days, Karen was under investigation. Meanwhile, her behavior got even more unhinged. She started sending emails to the HOA board claiming I was threatening her safety, said I was mentally unstable and likely to retaliate. I hadn't spoken a word to her since the demolition. My lawyer advised silence, and I stuck to it. But Karen was unraveling. You could smell the desperation. She sent a community-wide newsletter claiming I'd been harboring illegal weaponry and was under FBI investigation. Then, she had the audacity to attend the next HOA board meeting like nothing happened. I showed up too, this time in civilian clothes, sitting quietly in the back, laptop in hand. When it was time for public comment, I stood up and said just one thing. I'd like to show you all a video. I played the footage. Karen, on my property, directing the Bulldozer. Her face frozen in HD on the projector. The room went dead silent. Then someone whispered, "Oh my God." I handed out copies of the permit office letter, the emails, the forged forms. Karen stood up, turned red, and screamed, "This is harassment. He's making this up." No one believed her anymore. The board voted unanimously to suspend her position pending investigation. She stormed out. 3 days later, detectives served a search warrant at her house. What they found blew the whole case open. Karen had a literal filing cabinet filled with fake documents, demo orders, citations, fine letters she had never submitted to the city. Some are dated years back. Turns out, I wasn't the first person she'd gone after. Other neighbors had their sheds removed, porches flagged, and fines leveled under completely bogus pretenses. She'd printed it all herself, even had a fake stamp. Her computer showed a trail of emails impersonating city officials, posing as enforcement agents. She'd built an entire empire of intimidation. That night, she was arrested for felony fraud, criminal impersonation, destruction of property, and abuse of position. I stood across the street and watched her get led away in cuffs. She caught my eye as they put her in the cruiser. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word, but I recorded it. For the record, Karen's arrest was only the beginning. As a cop, I've seen a lot of suspects hauled away in cuffs, but few looked as utterly stunned as Karen did that night. The woman who spent years micromanaging lawn heights and paint shades couldn't comprehend that her iron grip on the neighborhood had finally slipped, that her fake HOA fiefdom, her bogus citations, her counterfeit demolition orders had finally collapsed under the weight of her own arrogance. But justice moves slow, painfully slow. While Karen sat in a holding cell awaiting charges, I was still picking up the literal and legal pieces of my life. My insurance company was dragging its feet. The demolition hadn't been authorized by the city or a contractor I'd hired, which complicated liability. They wanted to investigate everything. In the meantime, I was homeless, sleeping in a buddy's guest room with my dog, trying to hold my job together while fielding calls from lawyers, reporters, and neighbors who suddenly found their voices. That's when the stories started pouring in. Turns out Karen's campaign of control had extended far beyond what anyone imagined. One couple said she fined them $1,500 for having a non-conforming wreath on their front door during Christmas. Another claimed she'd ordered a crew to trim a 20-year-old tree without permission because it blocked uniform sight lines. A retired vet told me Karen had cited him for improper flag display because he'd flown a slightly faded American flag during a holiday weekend. She fined him $100 a day until he removed it. Each story followed the same pattern: intimidation, forged warnings, fake fines, and threats of escalation. The HOA board had been either asleep at the wheel or too scared to cross her. But not anymore. A special emergency meeting was called by the newly appointed interim board president, an older woman named Cynthia who'd kept her head down until now. This time, nearly the entire neighborhood showed up, standing room only. People brought folders, documents, evidence. Some even cried while describing how they'd felt powerless for years. I watched the anger swell into something close to revolution. Cynthia took the floor and said clearly, "We're turning over everything to the city and the DA's office. No more secrets, no more fear." That meeting marked the beginning of Karen's true reckoning. Over the next several weeks, detectives, code enforcement, and the city attorney built a rock-solid case. The fraudulent demolition of my home was the headline charge, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. They unearthed years' worth of forged documents, unapproved fines, and unauthorized property actions. She had literally created an alternate version of the HOA rules. Her own secret amendments she'd inserted into official notices to justify her actions. It was textbook fraud, and the scope of it shocked even the city prosecutor. In the meantime, my lawyer Josh filed a civil suit on my behalf. Karen Brooks, the HOA board, as it existed under her control, and the Eagle Eye Excavation Company, though we exempted Luis personally given his cooperation. We sued for destruction of private property, emotional distress, loss of assets, and punitive damages. The civil suit quickly became a local news story, then a regional one. I was interviewed on TV, reluctantly at first, but I realized the public attention helped. The exposure encouraged more victims to come forward. People from other communities recognized Karen from previous HOA disputes in older neighborhoods. Apparently, she had a history of bouncing between HOA boards like a dictator looking for a new country. My precinct was incredibly supportive. My chief told me, "You handled this like a pro. You kept your cool and gathered the evidence." Not many people would have had the patience or the foresight to document everything the way you did. By the time Karen's trial began, the courtroom was packed. The prosecution laid everything out in brutal detail. The forged demolition order, her impersonation of city officials, the manipulated fines, the emails, the phone calls, the digital trail. They had witnesses. They had victims. They had my body cam footage, the surveillance tapes, and even a recorded voicemail where she said, "If the city won't do it, we will. That house needs to be erased." Her defense team tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, said she believed she had implied authority under emergency powers granted by the HOA charter. But when asked where those powers were written down, she couldn't produce a single page of legitimate documentation. Under oath, she folded. And then came her cross-examination. My lawyer played a 45-second clip from the security footage, her standing at the edge of my driveway, grinning as the bulldozer tore into my living room. When asked if she understood she was authorizing demolition on private property she did not own, her response was a flustered, "I was doing what was necessary to maintain community order." The jury took less than 3 hours. Guilty on multiple felony counts: fraud, criminal impersonation, destruction of property, and abuse of a legal position. She was sentenced to 8 years, with the possibility of parole in 4. She was also hit with over $600,000 in restitution, most of which came from liquidation of her assets, including her own home. Her sentencing day was bittersweet. I showed up in court in full dress uniform. Not to gloat, just to witness the end. She glanced at me once as she was led away in cuffs. No smirk this time. Just a broken, exhausted woman who'd spent years pretending to be powerful and finally learned the law doesn't care about clipboards and fake authority. But my story didn't end there. The HOA was disbanded temporarily by city order. A full audit was done. The old board members resigned. A new volunteer committee formed. Honest, transparent, and under city supervision. They invited me to be part of it. I respectfully declined. I had other things to do. The community rallied to support me. Fundraisers, food, offers to help clear the rubble. I was touched, but I didn't want charity. I wanted justice. I wanted to rebuild. So I did. With the civil settlement, plus what I received from my insurance company after legal pressure, I rebuilt the house, exactly the same way it had been. Red door, steel awnings, wraparound porch. Same layout, same garage, same fence. Almost like nothing had changed. Except everything had. I added one small change. A plaque on the front porch, mounted to the right of the door. Black metal, simple font. This home was rebuilt after being unlawfully destroyed. Let it serve as a reminder that no one is above the law. And then I installed a new set of cameras, just in case. Months later, I was on patrol when I got flagged down by an older woman on my block, Cynthia, the new HOA president. She smiled, handed me a gift bag, and said, "For everything you went through, thank you." Inside was a bottle of whiskey, a custom-engraved wrench, and a note. "We've got your back now. If anyone ever tries this again, the whole block's bringing shovels." Turns out, sometimes justice doesn't just rebuild a house. It rebuilds a community. Karen tried to destroy my home. Too bad I'm a cop. Too bad I caught it all on camera. Too bad I made damn sure she couldn't bulldoze the truth.